If I asked you, what did a parent or grandparent tell you 3 years ago today, chances are you might not be able to remember. However, if I asked you to tell me a story they told you, I would guess this wouldn't be so hard. In Chip and Dan Heath's book, Made to Stick, their research showed that students were less likely to tell a story in a 1-minute presentation than to give a statistic. However, those listening were 12 times more likely to remember the story than the statistic. So what is happening? As a communication instructor who has studied storytelling and a human who just really loves it, I love being able to share the fascinating research that explains just why this process has held up through hundreds of years. So today, I want to explore and deepen our understanding of why stories stick. We'll look at 3 chemicals that are released in our brain during the story process. We'll call it the OCD arc of storytelling. First, we'll talk about oxytocin. Second, we'll discuss cortisol. And finally, we'll look at dopamine. So let's begin. Our first stop is oxytocin. In the 2014 article, Why Your Brain Loves Good Storytelling, published in the Harvard Business Review, Paul Zak explains oxytocin is the chemical released when we are shown kindness or are trusted. It's been described as the moral molecule, bonding us to others. Leo Widrich, in his essay, The Science of Storytelling, What Listening to a Story Does to Our Brains, explains that when we hear a story, the chemical is responsible for creating a deeper connection between us and the storyteller, or a character in the story. Think about your favorite character in a movie or television series. You like them and you want good things to happen to them. Andrew Stanton, the writer for Pixar, sums it up by saying, the first rule in storytelling is make me care. And once our brains are invested and that story has our attention, we can move on to the second chemical in the OCD arc, cortisol. In Lainey Peterson's Harvard Business article, The Science of Storytelling, published in 2017, she explains, cortisol is one of those key chemicals involved in formulating our memories. In The Science of Story, Jeremy Smith explains that when there's conflict or tension in a story, our engaged brains begin to reach heightened awareness. We become more alert, we become tense, stressed, even afraid. This is when cortisol is being released. When James Bond is sprinting through a dark parking garage, his heart is racing. Now, thanks to the power of storytelling, so is yours. Cortisol is responsible for us watching the next episode because we cannot physically sleep. Or we squeeze the person sitting next to us when a dinosaur leaps onto the screen. But thankfully, good storytelling doesn't leave us in a permanent state of unrest. So we've talked about oxytocin making us care and cortisol making us stress. Now let's wrap up this storytelling experience with the final chemical, dopamine. Dopamine is a positive chemical. It's linked to lots of happy feelings. Neuroscientists have linked it to learning and even motivation. In this article, What Does Dopamine Mean? By Burke, he explains most of us know firsthand the rush that comes with our 2 favorite characters finally finding each other and falling in love, or the superhero overcoming his nemesis. We even use language like, that's a feel-good movie. While we've experienced it, we may not realize it can all be linked back to the chemical cocktail happening in our brains. Famous author Neil Gaiman explains it this way. Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. When a story gives us a positive ending or outcome, it can leave us feeling motivated, inspired, even hopeful. So today, we've explored the science behind storytelling and looked at the roller coaster our brain takes when engaged in good storytelling. The oxytocin, cortisol, dopamine process is what not only entertains us, but causes a story to stay in our brains long after we've forgotten a statistic. I hope this has helped you gain a stronger understanding of just how powerful the art of storytelling is. Remember, it isn't magic, it's just science.